Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you on the week that the NFL is set to announce their schedule, and they are already giving us a few little teasers as to what it is going to be. I'm recording this at 8:17 in the morning, and they've already told us that this season will kick off, as I think many people might have expected, with the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, the Super Bowl champions always host the first game of the season, and they will be taking on the Baltimore Ravens in what is an AFC Championship rematch from last year. Now, given the opponents that the Kansas City Chiefs could have faced, there was some argument that maybe they would have played the Houston Texans because of the upcoming rising story that they are, similar to the Detroit Lions when they kicked off against the Chiefs last year. There was some argument that maybe they want to face the Los Angeles Chargers, really build on that Herbert-Mahomes rivalry, as it were, and also with Jim Harbaugh now back in the NFL. Maybe they want to highlight his first game. So there were a couple of options to go with, but I think on the face of it, the two best teams in the AFC from last year, including the league MVP and Lamar Jackson against the best quarterback in the league. It was always going to be this. It was always going to be this. But anyway, more about the schedule later. First, I do just want to say, as I all do at the start of every week, that it is always a pleasure for you to join us. If you are new, thank you very much for listening. And if you are returning, then thank you very much for making me a small part of your week. Don't forget that you can like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And also don't forget to reach out to me on social media. I am on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, all with the same handles at Baldwin Sports Media. So if there's any topics you want to have discussed, or if there's any criticism or even praise, then feel free to reach out on those platforms rather, and feel free to continue the debate on there. Now, with that being said, on with the rest of the show. And it starts off with what I just hinted at, and is going to be more schedule talk. Now, as I'm sure you've seen over the past couple of weeks, it has been widely, pretty much confirmed that the NFL is going to be playing two games on Christmas Day, even though Christmas Day falls on a Wednesday this year, which was always really the last free day for the NFL to go and attack. Obviously, we know Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays is regular. Now, after the college season ends, they play games on Saturdays. They could play a game on Friday if they could. Wednesday was always the last game for them, or the last day of the week rather, for them to try and put the product down our throat, as it were. And this year they are really going all in, and there are reports they are going to be playing two games on Christmas Day. And the further reports are that it's going to be Netflix are going to be the company that is going to be streaming the games, at least in the US. I know that if you're watching the games internationally, rather, it's still with your local broadcaster, like back in the UK. It will always be on Sky because they have the contract for that, for instance. However, a lot of the discourse coming out of this is now it's just an extra service for people to pay to watch the NFL on. And if you've been watching social media, you may have seen the post that they're saying that it's going to cost about $850 for people to watch the NFL this year, or for you to watch every game. That's YouTube TV at, I believe it's around $70, $75 a month, whatever it is. Then you add in Peacock, then you add in Amazon Prime, and then if you add the Netflix onto the top of it, it brings you, the figure that has been bandied about is it costs you $850 a year to watch the NFL. And a lot of people are complaining that it just seems like too much, and the NFL is effectively money grabbing you. And to an extent, I agree with that. There are too many streaming services that you have to sign up for these days. But my one sort of counteract to that is that everyone complains about the amount of streaming services there are and the amount of streaming services they already pay for. Does that not mean you are already covered? Like, this was an argument that Mike Florio put out when he was talking about the Peacock having their playoff game this past season. I can't remember which playoff game it was, but there was the game just on Peacock. And he was using the argument that you pay whatever it is, for Peacock for the month. I believe it's $10 without the adverts through NBC. But you get the game, but you also then get a month of whatever there is on Peacock. I think the best one he uses and the one that I use it for the most is to watch The Office reruns. So surely everyone is pretty much in the same thing. Like, everyone has their streaming services already in place. So it's not like this is an extra $850 a month. It could pretty much be branded as $850 that you are already paying for all these services. Like, is there anyone really who doesn't have Netflix at this point? I know that they were pretty much the original streaming service and are pretty much the biggest when it comes to that sort of streaming. So they're not asking you to add any more. They're pretty much utilizing what they or what people pretty much already have. Now, again, that's not to necessarily defend the NFL or defend Netflix or defend streaming services in this. As I said, I do think there are far too many. But can you really honestly say that you aren't already subscribed to? I mean, YouTube TV aside, because that's basically replacing basic cable. But for the additional ones, shall we say, and your local TV market, like for CBS and Fox and ABC, you're already paying for it. So they're not asking you to go out and pay anything extravagantly extra. And in the example Mike Flores said, you get everything else with it. So yes, you have to pay whatever the monthly fee is for Netflix, but then you also get a month's worth of Netflix with it to watch, the movies and TV shows that they have. So they're not. Yes, it is annoying, but it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to have to pay that much for a month's worth of content in a way. So I can pretty much understand both sides of the argument on this, but in the grand scheme of things, I pretty much fall on the NFL side of things. Is that you are already watching things. All we're doing is taking a product and putting it onto a channel or a streaming service that the vast majority of people probably already have. It's not like they haven't created their own app and their own streaming service that you have to pay, or like a pay-per-view that you have to pay $5 just for this specific one event for. So I can understand the complaining, but as I say, in the grand scheme of things, I'm with the NFL on this. I think there's far too much complaining over what is a pretty insignificant argument in the grand scheme of things. Which actually somehow brings us neatly onto our next topic, which surrounds Netflix, which was the Tom Brady roast. Now, I know I'm slightly late to the party on this in terms of the reaction, but just for the little bit of disclosure, last week's episode I did record on Sunday afternoon because I was incredibly busy on Monday, so I had to do the thing pre-recorded. So I recorded it before the Tom Brady roast came out. But my word, that thing was absolutely incredible. I'm not going to repeat all the jokes, but I just want to say kudos to Tom Brady for being man enough to take all the stuff that was going on surrounding him, and for all the people to go through some of the jokes and it was just absolutely brilliant. My one complaint about the whole thing would be Bill Belichick. Nothing really that he did wrong, but it's more the fact of, where has this Bill Belichick been all our lives? We see what he's like in press conferences and the famous "We're on to Cincinnati," and the fact that he will just grumble at reporters for asking legitimate questions and just appear incredibly grumpy and angry. But we see what Bill Belichick is now. So, there's all this talk that, and I believe news confirmed that he's going to be a regular guest on the Peyton Manning Monday Night Football cast. So we're going to see a little bit more personality out of him then. I'm just a bit annoyed that we haven't been able to. You had this in your back pocket. Why did you not? Why did you hide it from us all these years? No, that's the bit that gets me. As I said, I'm late to the party on this, so I don't want to go through every single line or analyze every single performance. But as I say, kudos to every single one. But Bill Belichick, I hope that you stay in the. I hope you stay in this mode when you go into the media and don't revert back to mean old grumpy Belichick that we used to see at the podium in New England. I like this Bill Belichick. I just wish we could have seen a lot more of it over the past 25 or so years that he was in charge of the Patriots. So that's my only gripe. Everything else absolutely perfect. Now, this next topic, I'm not too sure how to segue into it, so I am just going to segue into it. And this one concerns a much more serious matter, and it involves Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice, who there are more negative stories coming out about him and his character, shall we say. Now, we already know the situation with Rashee Rice, involved in a high-speed car collision over the course of the off-season. There have also been reports that he was involved in an altercation at a club as well. All of this could very well lead to a suspension from the NFL because, whilst publicly or, in the eyes of the law, there may not be any charges brought on, we know that the NFL does their own investigation and brings their own suspension into matters for off-field incident. And now news further coming out that could impact this suspension as well, this potential suspension as well, because according to Pro Football Talk, there were some concerns about Rashee Rice in the build-up to when he was drafted last year. Now, I'll read this verbatim from Pro Football Talk. I am going to miss out the key the details of the report. I'll leave you to go into it just because I just feel very uncomfortable reading it out. But suffice to say that on top of all this, per multiple sources, this is from Pro Football Talk, multiple teams learned during the pre-draft process about an alleged incident involving Rice while he was at MSU, which is where he went to college. Multiple sources expressed a belief that every team was aware of the incident before the draft, including the Chiefs. Kansas City drafted Rice in round 2. He was the 55th overall selection, and the incident was never reported to authorities by SMU. However, as is hinted, the fact that this is all coming out now means that this is just another stick at which the NFL could beat Rashee Rice with. Now, I've expressed my concerns about Rashee Rice and what a potential suspension could mean for the Chiefs in general because of how important he was and how he was their number one wide receiver, and if they don't replace him, then you're effectively relying on Travis Kelce again to be the number one guy, which is perhaps why the Kansas City Chiefs went out and drafted Xavier Worthy with their first round pick this year, another a very talented wide receiver, because they're maybe thinking ahead to we're gonna have to replace this guy, maybe not just for a couple of games, maybe for even longer across the season. So I've expressed my concerns there. Now I think we need to really start talking about concerns about Rashee Rice, the person, rather than just the player and what he brings to the field, as it were. And I think this is starting to get into the territory of the Kansas City Chiefs might be better off getting rid of him, because if you give one incident that happened, well, if you read further into the details, maybe not so much forgive the incident. But if they're willing to let that first incident go, fine. Then this latest thing with the car collision, then it's starting to rack up that maybe, again, this is all just based off information that is out there. I'm not saying he's guilty of anything, but the fact that there is so much coming out of everything right now, in my opinion, it is starting to point to maybe bad character of, what are you getting yourself into for anything further down the line, and are you willing to take that risk? And it is starting to get to that point where if I'm the Chiefs, I maybe think we just cut our losses and move on from him, because I don't want anything further coming out, with it being attached to me. I don't want the headline to read Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice involved in or alleged or found guilty of potentially further down the line. Again, I'm not saying he's guilty or innocent of anything right now, but the news coming out and the various reports, it's starting to lean one way that you would understand if the Chiefs decided to move on from him at this stage. Again, it's going to be a hard choice for them to make because of his impact on the field, but I just think in the long run, you've got to start looking at, right, is this really the best for the franchise to be able to keep hold of him? And again, if I'm the Chiefs, I think long and hard, but I think we've got to move away from this. And again, no real easy way to segue off a topic like that, but we move on to our penultimate topic of the podcast and our final NFL topic of the podcast. And this one, once again, concerns the situation surrounding Kirk Cousins and his move away from the Minnesota Vikings and his move to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, obviously, in the wake of the draft, I expressed what a lot of people were saying, the shock that the Atlanta Falcons would bring in Kirk Cousins and then draft Michael Penix Jr. to be, his apparent successor in the role. And how, if I'm Kirk Cousins, maybe that doesn't sit well with me. But the news coming out would probably further indicate even more so as to why it wouldn't sit well with him, because news has come out through Albert Breer at Sports Illustrated. And again, I'll read this to you verbatim. So the reason he decided to leave Minnesota is because the Vikings were very upfront with the 35-year-old about the possibility that, even in the case he stayed, they take a quarterback of the future high in the draft. Now, credit to the Vikings for that. That's them being open and honest and upfront and saying, you're willing to, if you want to stay, fine, but just to let you know, our succession plan, we're working towards it. If you want to stay, fine. If you don't, we totally understand, move away. Good for the Vikings, very well done. The report further goes on to say that tying that together with the team's willingness to guarantee part, not all, of a second year on another contract, Cousins figured out that if he stayed, there was a good shot that he'd be on the move for 2025. So again, they sort of come to a mutual understanding, him and the Vikings, this isn't going to be the place for you, we are moving on. All fine. But then it just takes you back to just the first part of it just really sort of hits. Is that the reason he left the Vikings was because they said we're drafting quarterback of the future. So there's always going to be that person behind him, nipping at his heels. Now we find out, and it makes the whole Atlanta situation even worse because it makes you think, were the Atlanta Falcons honest and upfront about Michael Penix Jr. or whatever quarterback happened to fall to them? And did they tell Kirk Cousins when they were meeting him and all that sort of stuff? Did they tell him, right, this is our plan? Because it makes you think, again, just based off what we are reading here, it makes you think they kept their quarterback plans a secret. Because if he was going to leave the Vikings because he didn't want to have that immediate competition or that threat behind him, why would he go to the Atlanta Falcons and face pretty much the same situation? Now, again, if they'd have said, we're going to draft a quarterback, again, I'm just speculating based off all the available information. But if they'd have said, we're going to draft a quarterback in the 3rd round to maybe develop under you. Like, again, the talk was always Spencer Rattler, someone you could draft late and develop. If that was the situation, I think there'd be a level of understanding there. Of, right, we're going to take this young one, give it 3 or 4 years, and then when you get to 39, we'll assess it from there. But to go and draft a 1st round quarterback after what he effectively went through with the Minnesota Vikings, that just feels a little bit shady in my eyes from the Atlanta Falcons. That's the reason he left the Vikings. The reason he came here was because he probably felt he had a free reign for the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, depending on how he feels. To now have that situation where he's got someone that could easily take his job and is looking to take his job, and the franchise took a big swing and a big risk in order to get. If I was Kirk Cousins, I'd be thinking very long and hard about whether or not maybe asking for a trade after not necessarily straight away, but if things aren't looking too promising, maybe saying, no, if this is the guy of your future, then he's your future. I'm out of here. I'm going to try somewhere else that, is going to be looking for a quarterback in 2025. So the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins, two of the more boring names, shall we say, in the NFL, look as if they are going to be dominating a lot of the headlines this upcoming season. And I, for one, can't wait just to see any little twist and turn. What does this mean for Kirk Cousins and his future? What does this mean for Michael Penix? It seems like this is something that's going to be causing a lot of drama over the course of the year, and could really blow up in the Atlanta Falcons in their face, because they have handled this incredibly poorly in my eyes. And if things go bad, I don't think they're going to go bad. I think they're going to go horrendous. So this does have the potential to blow up their season. So just be aware of that. And now for the final topic of the week, and I usually take this away from football and focus on sports, but on other sports rather. But there is one news story that has caught my eye this week that I just could not simply ignore. And it's come across on social media that there has been... Technology is great, but there are times where you think they didn't really think this through. And the best example of that is the portal that has grabbed a lot of attention. That it's basically a live stream between Dublin in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, and New York City. And it's a way for, it was envisioned as a way for people to connect. And, oh, look, I'm live chatting to someone, strangers across an ocean and all that sort of jazz. And great ceremonies and whatever when it was first launched, and everyone enjoying themselves. But again, this is one they didn't really think through, because you just don't understand. Whenever something nice comes along, someone will come along to try and ruin it. And that is exactly what the people of Dublin have done. And credit to them for taking this opportunity and seizing it with both hands, and just, I want to say having fun, but taking things a little bit too far. But again, in this situation, there should have been someone who says, are we sure that no one's going to exploit this for something, let's just say, inappropriate, shall we say? Because there have been clips going around online. Again, remember what this is meant to do. This is meant to be for people to be nice to each other and, wave and, see, oh, look, I'm looking live at someone from New York whilst I'm in Dublin. It's effectively a grander scheme of FaceTime, but with a stranger. You don't have to actually do anything yourself. But the people of Dublin have taken things to the extreme with, again, some inappropriate things, showing some images and showing parts of their body, shall we say. And it's just one of those... This portal, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the first and the last portal that you see, because people are going to look at that and think, yeah, maybe not such a good idea. In fact, I would not be surprised if that portal thing only lasts a couple of months, because there's going to come a time where something a little bit too over the top happens, and people are going to say, yeah, this might have cost us X amount of dollars or pounds, or euros rather, because we're talking about the Republic of Ireland. Are we really willing to go through with this again? And is it really worth the bad PR that we're going to be getting as a result of it? So by all means, go look up what they have been doing online. It's, again, depending on your level of humor, you'll find it funny. You may find it offensive, but that's kind of the point. Is if you do find it offensive, that's a reason why they're probably not going to have this going on for much longer. And I'm not going to be doing this show for much longer, because we have reached the end of the show. And I want to once again thank you very much for joining. Don't forget you can like and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform wherever you're listening to this. And don't forget to reach out on social media at Baldwin Sports Media on TikTok, on YouTube, and on Instagram. And this week, enjoy the NFL schedule release. I'm sure that's going to be something we're going to be talking about next week. What the interesting games are, whether or not anyone really got screwed over, what the final decision was on those Christmas Day games that we talked about earlier. It's going to be good to break it down, and who knows, maybe the Atlanta Falcons will do something else to completely screw over Kirk Cousins in the meantime as well. So until next week, you guys can all take care.